again to a special episode of Chosun Yonghwa Review. Today, we're looking at the most well-renowned of all North Korean movies, that is 1972's Kotpun, known in English as The Flower Girl. Allegedly written as a screenplay by Kim Il-sung himself while in prison in China in the 1930s, though it's very doubtful that he wrote it entirely by himself, the opera is widely hailed as one of the five great revolutionary operas, and was finally made into a film in 1972, directed by Cho Ik-kyu, where it was released to international acclaim in the communist lands of East Asia, as well as the Soviet Union, and was the first North Korean film to win an International Film Award. It is considered de facto the greatest film ever made in North Korea, with a reputation that cannot be overstated as the pinnacle of North Korean cinema. This film also made waves in South Korea, where it was enjoyed by South Korean university students, despite the film's official ban in the country. The film begins with our young heroine, who is simply known as Kotpun, which literally means flower seller, in Japanese Korea during the 1930s, doing exactly just that, attempting to sell flowers to bystanders in her local village with little success. After day's end, she counts up what little money she has made for the day. Upon realizing that it isn't much, she goes to see a fortune teller and hopes to hear some good news. The fortune teller asks her about her family, and upon hearing that her father is dead, brother is in jail, mother is ill, and her sister is blind, he feels contempt for the poor girl and out of pity gives her a fortune that a noble man will come to save her and her family soon.
너희 어머니 병도 다 나을 테니 너무 낙심 말아라.
Kotpun then promptly makes her way home, where she runs into her blind little sister, Sun-hui, who gets around by the use of a stick. Kotpun asks why Sun-hui is out by herself at night. Sun-hui tells her that their landlords are angry because their mother refuses to sell Kotpun as a kiseng, aka a prostitute, to their family. The scene shifts to Kotpun's mother, struggling to wash her landlord's clothes while horribly ill. One of the noble's wives, Mrs. Pei, scolds her, berating her for being sluggish and not selling Kotpun to them, saying that she could live debt-free if she were to do so. Kotpun's mother refuses, however, and continues with her grueling labor. Kotpun and Sun-hui both wait patiently at their dilapidated home until their mother arrives. She arrives with a small batch of rice she'd gotten from another worker. She offers the rice to Sun-hui and Kotpun while lying that she'd already eaten, and the three lie down and interact as a family despite the bleakness of the situation. Their mother laments that their son is probably dead and urges Kotpun to take care of Sun-hui in the event that she dies. Kotpun refuses to give up hope, however, and tells her mother of the fortune she received, that their brother will return with a nobleman who will save them. As she looks up upon a sleeping Sun-hui with her mother, she begins to cry and has a flashback. It's a normal day at work like any other. Kotpun and Senhui are both little girls who mostly play and have fun, while their brother and mother work for their landlords to earn their keep. Mrs. Pei, however, is a cruel sociopath. When Sunhui inspects a pot of boiling water meant for tea out of sheer curiosity, the landlord kicks the pot of scalding hot water onto baby Sunhui's eyes, causing her severe burns and her ultimate blindness. Later in the evening, their brother returns home to find Sunhui begging for him, but crying that she cannot see him. Furious, the brother takes it upon himself to avenge his sister and sets fire to the Pei's house. He isn't able to evade capture, however, and is arrested by local police who carry him away. Not before his family runs to him, however. He tells Kotpun to take care of Sunhui and mother, and that he will return. All the while, his family cries in pain as he disappears over the evening sky. With the flashback over, the next morning, Kotpun is encouraged by her mother's friend to go to their landlord's house to get some rice on a loan. Despite her mother's stern warnings against Kotpun ever going there, she feels like she has no choice and goes anyways. While standing in line, however, she's greeted by Mrs. Pei, the cruel old woman from before. Mrs. Pei berates Kotpun for refusing to work for them, but having the audacity to borrow rice. After she leaves, Kotpun has a change of heart and decides to leave to go sell flowers in the town. In the town, she normally is successful selling her flowers to wealthy suit-wearing Japanese men who buy them for their Korean girlfriends. Late one evening, however, a wealthy Japanese man accompanied by his kimono-wearing Japanese wife attempts to buy a flower from Kotpun. Before he can, however, his wife calls Kotpun dirty, which causes him to walk away, not before spitting his cigarette at her. A shocked and hurt Kotpun looks down at her dirty handbook, complete with worn shoes. Later on, she comes home to talk briefly with her mother before they all go to sleep. She awakens in the middle of the night to find her mother gone. She sets out to the Pei's residence to find her hard at work grinding rice, talking with her friend who begs her to stop and let Kotpun come and work. Her mother is unrelenting, however, saying that she would rather die than let Kotpun become a sex slave. Kotpun, with tears in her eyes, is overwhelmed with the guilt of watching her mother work herself into the ground, comes in and takes over the grinder for her so her mother can rest. Kotpun promises her that she will earn enough money selling flowers to buy her medicine, and that when her brother returns, they will all be okay. Her mother, revealing a smile at her daughter's innocence, also reassures her that she will not die while Kotpun is alone. Just as all seems okay, however, Kotpun's mother accidentally falls while carrying a pot of flour, causing it to spill all over the ground. Mr. Pei, who observed the event, scolds her and beats her with his cane in front of Kotpun. The next day, Kotpun goes out to collect edible grass to give to a local saleswoman who offered to pay her for it. While this happens, unbeknownst to Kotpun, Sunhui and her friend team up with a local violinist and sing while handing out flowers, earning them more than enough money for the medicine. When Kotpun finds out about this, she scolds Sunhui for becoming a beggar and tells her never to do it again or their brother won't return. Sunhui apologizes, crying that it was only for their mom. Kotpun reluctantly accepts her apology, and they finally go to the doctor to buy medicine for their mother.
언니는 천대받고 업심을 받으며 꽃을 팔지만 넌 그런 짓을 해서는 안 돼.
The two sisters are bright with smiles as they walk home hand in hand, eager to finally heal their mother and get their life back on track.
순이야, 이제 엄마 병도 낫고 오빠도 돌아오면 정말 좋겠지?
야, 정말.
아이고 형님, 이게 웬일이야?
Instead, however, they return to a nightmare. Instead of returning to their sick mother, they arrive only to find the other slaves surrounding their mother, whose heart finally gave out under the immense stress of being worked to death. Kotpun lets out a heart-wrenching scream as she runs to her mother's side. Sunhui, still holding her mother's medicine, stumbles her way to her mother's corpse, crying out in vain for her mom to wake up, saying that she brought her her medicine.
어머니가 가시다니. 아버지도 아빠도 없는데 어머니만 믿고 살던 우리를 두고 어떻게 가요? 우린 못 살아요.
어머니는 그 한 송이 꽃도 받지 않고 갔으니 어머니가 딸의 심정을 몰라서란 말인가. 야속하다, 야속하다. 야속한 이 사연이 무슨 까닭인지, 원하는 쌓여도 풀길 없는 이 사연이 그 무슨 까닭인지 그 누가 대답해 주랴.
700리도 넘는 길을.
After burying their mother and finally getting Sunhui to sleep, she has a conversation with her mother's friend at their home. Kotpun states that she can no longer stay here, or she will be enslaved by the Pei residents in order to finish paying off their mother's debt. Feeling she can no longer wait around for her brother to return, she makes the decision to take the 175-kilometer journey on foot to the prison where her brother is being held. Her mother's friend promises to take Sunhui in where she can live with her friend, and gives Kotpun what money she has to help her. Kotpun thanks her for her hospitality. While stroking her younger sister's hair as she sleeps, she bids her farewell and promises to return before heading out into the night. She encounters many horrific sights on her 108-mile journey, including slave laborers being forced to build a railroad for the Imperial Japanese Army, or a blind old woman being carried around by her granddaughter while begging. Upon reaching the village where her mother is incarcerated, she meets up with a nice woman, a young mother who is also there to see someone. Upon having her name called, however, Kotpun is shown a picture of her brother, and is told coldly without remorse that he has died and to go home. Jesus Christ, this film is like a sadist's dream. Can anything nice happen to this girl for a change? Kotpun, feeling utterly hopeless at this point, contemplates committing suicide by jumping off a cliff into the sea, but ultimately stops herself upon seeing visions of her family. She then walks aimlessly across the Korean countryside before collapsing from exhaustion. She is quickly discovered by a group of girls who bring her into their home to recover, but is kicked out by the man of the house as soon as she regains consciousness because she has no money. She then continues to wander the countryside as the freezing winter sets in.
꽃분이 애가
3 months have passed since Kotpun left. Everyone at her home village presumes her to be dead, much to the dismay of her sister Sunhui, who begins to wail on a hill at night waiting for her to come. Around the same time, Pei's wife falls seriously ill, which is blamed on demons. Mrs. Pei, upon hearing Sunhui's cries from afar, is haunted by the sound and believes her to be the source of the demon that's infected her. As such, they quickly hatch a plan to rid the village of her forever. One of the servants tells Sunhui that Kotpun has arrived in the village but must rest. He offers to take Sunhui there, but very quickly carries her off into the blizzard, intending to do away with her for good.
꽃분이가 와요. 빨리.
아니, 뭐 꽃분이가?
꽃분이가 오다니.
아니, 이게 꽃분이가 아니냐?
Our Kotpun is not dead, however, and returns to the village, much to the surprise and joy of everyone. Upon being told of Sunhui's fate, however, and the likely involvement of the Pei family, Kotpun finally decides that she's had enough and vows revenge on the family that killed her mother, imprisoned her brother, and hurt her Sunhui so much. She bursts through the gates of the Pei residence demanding the return of Sunhui. When the two act ignorant of what she's talking about, she throws the same pot of boiling water they used to blind Sunhui at them, causing them pain. Before she can continue, however, one of the guards knocks her out. Mr. Pei orders him to throw her into the icy river immediately. While this is happening, it just so happens that Kotpun's brother Cholyong returns with his friend to his home village, not as a dead man, but as a full-fledged revolutionary enlisted in Kim Il-sung's Korean Revolutionary Army. He and his friend stop by the night at his grandfather's house, where he is accompanied by a blind girl he found wandering in the snow. Cholyong immediately recognizes the girl as his sister and embraces her while whispering quietly that her brother has returned.
세상에 이런 일이 있나?
Cholyong and his friend hold a secret meeting with the village where they inform him that the Peis are holding Kotpun captive. A decision is made to liberate the village once and for all by killing them. Cholyong leads a peasant uprising against the Peis and the Japanese police. They storm the Pei residence where they are gathering for tea and quickly overwhelm them and killing them in the process. Kotpun is freed and after 6 long years is reunited with her brother in disbelief.
오빠.
꽃분아.
The two embrace, and tears flow as they hear the cries of Sunhui asking for her sister. They all embrace as a family as the crowd gathers around, not a dry eye in sight.
우리가 왜 이렇게 피눈물을 흘리며 살아야 하는지.
Cholyong tells the crowd that the reason for all of their unhappiness and corruption is due to the fact that they've lost their nation to the Japanese, but to have hope as Kim Il-sung's Korean Revolutionary Army has returned to liberate Korea from the Japanese. He urges them to join the KRA and to create a country without landlords and capitalists.
조선혁명군은 빼앗긴 나라를 찾기 위해서 우리 조선인민들이 압박과 착취가 없는 세상에서 마음 놓고 살 수 있게 하기 위해서 총을 들고 나섰습니다. 여러분도 조선혁명군을 도와 나서야 합니다.
The film ends with Kotpun, Sun-hwi, and Chol-ryong all reunited as a family. Chol-ryong assumes the role of the local party chief of the newly liberated village. Sun-hwi, along with the other children, are given books and attend school to become educated, while our Kotpun continues her eponymous work selling flowers, not as a dirty, hopeless beggar, but as an empowered, free woman in her beautiful land of 3,000 li. To truly review this film is a difficult task. It's certainly easy to see why this movie is considered North Korea's best film to date. It's an emotionally gripping experience from start to finish. The film makes you sympathize with the protagonist, not through propaganda or forced dialogue, but rather by doing an excellent job of showing the brutality and the corruption that was rampant in Korea during the Japanese occupation. The film does a phenomenal job of depicting the Korean elite who are in bed with the Japanese as the root cause of the problems in Korea, without over-exaggerating it to the point where it's unbelievable. The Japanese did indeed use Korean landowners as sort of the middleman between them and the Korean population, and in exchange for the landowners keeping some level of autonomy and status, so it's nice to see a level of historical accuracy here. The average Korean, and especially the average Korean woman, had virtually no rights whatsoever during or before the Japanese occupation. Whether they have more rights in present-day North Korea or not is debatable, but that's not the point. The point is to show North Korean audiences the beginnings of the peasant revolution in Korea under Kim Il-sung. And the movie probably struck a chord with many older audience members who remember well what the Japanese occupation was like. It was easy for Koreans to view Kim Il-sung as a liberator in those days, especially since there was no conceivable alternative. Many Koreans had been disillusioned with capitalism and equated it with Japanese imperialism. As a result, many Koreans viewed South Korea's free market system as a remnant of Japanese colonialism. Point being, the film does an excellent job of getting its point across without being overdramatic. The Kim Il-sung boasting and communism praising is left for the very end, which makes sense chronologically speaking since this is 18 years before Kim Il-sung rose to power in what would become North Korea. But even when it is mentioned, it's very brief. In fact, I think Kim Il-sung is only mentioned like twice in the whole film. So this film gets very good scores from me in the propaganda department. The film's soundtrack is an absolute masterpiece of Korean folk music. The film's titular song, The Flower-Selling Girl, is an emotionally gripping song that brings with it a wave of despair and hopelessness as we watch the somber innocence of Kotpun slowly fade away with every blow she's dealt. Whether it's at the beginning of the film, when we know nothing about her, the song makes us want to know more about her. Or during her lowest point when her mother is taken and the song almost commands tears as your heart breaks watching the familiar innocent spirit of this young girl die a slow but inevitable death. Being that this is a film adaptation of an opera of the same name, it's easy to see why they put so much effort into the soundtrack. It's one of the best scores in any film ever, not just among North Korean films. The soundtrack gets an A+, easy. Our characters are rich and diverse as well. Hong Young-hee easily steals the spotlight as Kotpun, our heroine who begins as an innocent, naive young girl who so desperately tries to keep hope alive in her family by collecting money, as well as gathering fortunes to keep spirits up. What makes her character arc so dynamic is that we can actually see the point where her innocence is lost, and it's not at the point you'd think where her mother dies. In my opinion, it's the scene where the Japanese woman calls her dirty and her husband spits his cigarette out at her. We see her pause for a moment to look down at her worn, dirty dress, as if truly looking in the mirror for the first time. It's hardly the first time she'd looked dirty, but the first time she'd ever truly felt the effects of what was said. It was at this point that she realized that she wasn't like everyone else, that she was truly different. From this point on, we only see that innocence diminish even further as she's slowly introduced to the harsh realities of life in Japanese Korea, and her struggle to adapt to it on her own without her mother to protect her. The girl is never given a break until the very end, and it's very easy to think that a sadist wrote the script for her. However, this has the effect of making the ending all that much more satisfying. To see her happy and smiling, carrying her flowers with her new family makes up for the harsh cruelty she'd endured in order to get it. Excellent character. Kotpun's mother is another example of a dedicated mother who protects her babies from a life of slavery and prostitution to the very end, often reminding herself that she cannot die or else the very same fate will befall her daughters. As a result, we see her go above and beyond what any other person could ordinarily do in order to save her children. She's a tragic character, with excellent writing that exemplifies the love a mother has for her children, and the lengths that said love will push her to. She serves as a personification of the harsh realities that befall many Koreans in those dark times, where working to death and slavery were all too common. Sun-hee is the story's confidant character, whose horrible tragedies that befall her act as the catalyst for our film's two heroes, Kotpun and Chol-young, forcing them to take action against the Pei family. For Chol-young, it's when Sun-hee is blinded by Mrs. Pei that emboldens him to retaliate by burning their storage of rice, which ultimately sends him to prison only for him to escape and become radicalized by the KRA. For Kotpun, it's the realization that she must find her brother to properly care for Sun-hee after their mother died that causes her to go find him, as well as the kidnapping of Sun-hee by the Pei family that finally pushes her over the edge to confront the Peis over their unforgivable crimes to her family over the years. While she's often portrayed as the lightning rod for all the bad things in the movie, she has her own static personality as well, as a kind, well-meaning, and surprisingly resourceful child despite her disability. The actress who played her did an excellent job, and I think I speak for everyone who's seen the movie when I say that it was hard not to feel a lump in your throat when she's crying out in desperation to her brother, "An boyo, an boyo, I can't see you, I can't see you," after being blinded by Mrs. Pei. Absolutely heart-wrenching scene.
이게 웬일이냐? 하늘도 무심하구나. 이 어린 것에서 눈까지 뺏어가다니. 아이고.
순이야, 나 여기 있어. 오빠가 안 뵈니?
안 보여, 아빠 안 보여.
순이야.
안
To-young, our hero brother at the end, doesn't get much attention as he's only featured in the flashback of the day Sun-hee was blinded and in the final 10 minutes of the movie. That said, he's a pretty well-developed character despite the limited screen time. We see his love for his siblings before and after his arrest and subsequent radicalization. Despite 6 years being away, he never forgot his mother and sister and ultimately kept his promise to return to them, to never leave again. The film's primary antagonists, the Pei family, are about as unlikable as antagonists can be. They're depicted as the prime example of corrupt capitalism and traditional Korean society up to that point. They use their wealth and connections with the Japanese to force peasants into obedience via rice loans that they could never hope to pay back, thus earning them a lifetime of indentured servitude, which basically makes them docile slaves, basically doing the Japanese's job of occupying for them. They are depicted as cold, calculated, sociopathic individuals with no remorse whatsoever for those below them. Mrs. Pei offers no apology or reconciliation for blinding Sunhui, who dared to look at a pot of water out of curiosity, nor does she offer any consolation to Kotpun after her mother just died of exhaustion. All they can think about is themselves and how much money they can make, to which the film uses to depict as the inherent evils of capitalism, while intertwining it with Japanese imperialism to make it seem like they're one and the same. As with all awful villains, they get what's coming to them, and although it doesn't happen on screen, it's implied that they were killed in the time-honored communist tradition of a public execution. So you're probably thinking at this point, come on Jesse, when are you going to start hammering this film like you do with every other film you review? Truth be told, I really don't have a lot of negative things to say about this film. It has great characters, a compelling story, a fantastic soundtrack, and the cinematography is actually better than most of its contemporary films. Remember, this movie came out in 1972, making it the oldest movie I reviewed thus far. This is just a really good movie. I enjoyed it so much that I actually finished watching it all in one sitting, which is something that I almost never do. And it only took me one more day to write the script. I was very eager to talk about this film, and in doing so wasted little time in procrastinating, a fate which often befalls my prior works. My only real criticism in the film is that the ending is really unclear and kind of leaves us with more questions than it answers. For one, it creates the assumption that it was Kim Il-sung and Kim Il-sung alone who liberated Korea from the Japanese. While we all know that this is demonstrably untrue, I always noticed that they never seem to include any of the other prominent KNA leaders, such as Kim Hyung-chun, for example, who was arguably more effective of a leader than Il-sung was. It's always Kim Il-sung and only Kim Il-sung, which kind of sucks. I mean, I get it, he's supposed to be the father of the country, the one who saved Korea from Japanese occupation, but I mean, look at the American Revolution, for example. Yeah, we have George Washington, he's considered the father of the United States, and he has this sort of pseudo-mystical reputation around him. Despite that, we still acknowledge the other founding fathers like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, other people who were just as important, if not on a military role, on a political role in founding the country. So it just always irked me that they never acknowledged anybody in the early days except for Kim Il-sung. Also, in the ending scene where Kotpun, Sunhui, and Choryong travel to their village, it kind of raises a few questions, namely, when does the scene take place? All the characters are the same age, but the scene shows Choryong in a position of power in the village, as well as there being a lack of any Japanese in the city, so clearly some time has passed, but not much. The film's story takes place in the 1930s, and the Japanese had a firm control over all of Korea, even for a short time after the official surrender on September 2nd, 1945. So, this couldn't have been after 1945, as Sunhui would have been an adult at this point. Is it implying that the KNA liberated the village from the Japanese right after they killed the Pei family? Pretty sure the Imperial Japanese Army isn't just going to take that lying down. My only guess is that it's playing off the pseudo-history of Kim Il-sung's slow but inevitable liberation of Korea, which started in the 1930s, but didn't end until 1945. How convenient. Other than that, though, I really don't have any other criticisms that are hardly worth pointing out. There isn't any anti-American propaganda, but there is a ton of anti-Japanese propaganda, as well as anti-capitalist feelings, but that's to be expected due to the film's settings. This is a great film that I think will appeal to a much wider audience than other North Korean films. So if you get the chance, I, along with the entire population of North Korea, highly recommend you watch The Flower Girl. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you have a great day.